If you have a desire to become a better version of your current self, then this podcast is for you. I share with you helpful thoughts, tips, and stories surrounding fitness and self-improvement which you can apply to your life today. So for those of you that want to take control of your life, to learn, to grow, to become that which you desire most, I am your host, Connor Malone, and this is the pursuit of constant improvement. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking to you about Stoicism and how it can be one of the most impeccable guides for young men with self-improvement on their self-improvement journey, and in my case, in their own pursuit of constant improvement. Now, if you're a young guy, if you're listening to this episode and you want to obviously improve, you're focused on self-improvement, you have an idea of this potential that you want to reach, I'm going to share with you how Stoicism has helped me start to do that. I'm going to share with you how Stoicism is like some of the key concepts of it and some of the things that you can take and apply to your life from it. If from this episode you get one thing, I would like it to be this, that you take something that you enjoy, you start to improve it, but then you continue to read up on Stoicism, because if you find something from this applicable, I almost guarantee you that you will find this so interesting, you'll find it so applicable to your life. Because Stoicism is a philosophy. I'll explain a little bit more about it. But the reason that it's so important to me is because obviously it's so applicable, but it's been about for thousands of years. There's been lots of philosophies over the period that humans have been around, but only few have survived. And Stoicism is one of those that have continued to survive and ultimately thrive. And that's because its use cases, it's so applicable to today's life. So if you've never heard of Stoicism before, it is a philosophy. It's an ancient philosophy which was founded in Greece. Now, a philosophy, in kind of simple terms, is like a way of living life. It's there's a lot of different philosophies. People have certain rules and guides with philosophies. And with Stoicism, they have that too. They have something called the four virtues. They have other things that they start to live by. A therapy, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that has taken a lot from Stoicism. So it's really transcended from over 2,000 years ago into today's living and how we live in this kind of modern era from here. So as I said, it is still incredibly applicable to today's life, and I'm sure you'll find that with today's episode. Now, I want to start with a story, because the story is applicable not just to young men, to anybody, but to me, I found a great deal of inspiration in this story, and it's how Stoicism was essentially started. It was started by a man called Zeno of Citium. So his name was Zeno, and he basically came from Cyprus, right? So this guy Zeno, he was quite a tall guy. He was described in literature as kind of darker skinned, as tanned, and he had this, again, quite a authoritative kind of look to him. Now, he came from a very wealthy family. They were merchants of this purple dye, okay? And this purple dye came from seashells, sea snails. So basically what happened is these sea snails, these slaves would get these sea snails from under the water. They would leave the shells out, and they would the sun would turn it into a dye, and basically this dye would then be sold on. This dye was used in emperor's robes and things like that. So it made them very wealthy. Okay, so they were merchants of these very wealthy oils. So this guy lived a good life, very wealthy all his life. And basically he was a kind of young man, and he was traveling. Basically they were on a voyage, if you like, to deliver some of this dye. Now think back to this time. Imagine you're in his case, you're delivering a lot of this dye. They didn't have banks and stuff back then. They didn't have secure homes. So they took everything with them. Okay, so he had all of his dye in his ship and everything like that. And they became shipwrecked. Okay, so something that, of course, not ideal, didn't happen to terribly wealthy people. One of the worst things that could have ever happened to him, he lost absolutely everything. Okay, so this guy, Zeno, he became shipwrecked and he landed on Athens. That's where he ended up. So he was in Athens, he had nothing. None of his wealth, it was all lost. He had nobody knew who he was. He couldn't say, oh, I'm from this family or whatever. Nothing, he had absolutely nothing. So he was walking the streets of Athens with nothing, obviously his head down in the ground, thinking, oh my God, my life couldn't get any worse. I've lost everything. I'm not going to be able to do anything from here. When he was walking, he found a bookshop, and for whatever reason, he decided to go in. So he went into this bookshop, he started kind of picking a few books and something, he had nothing else to do. And he found this book, and basically it was called Xenophon's Memorabilia, but it was a book about Socrates and parts of Socrates' lectures and everything like that. And what he found in that, because he found a lot of inspiration, he was reading it, he thought, whoa, holy shit, this guy, look at the way this guy thinks and everything like that, and he's reading through them. And he said to the bookkeeper, he says, where can I find a man like this? A man that talks like this, and he literally pointed outside, said, right there, go get that guy right there. He's a philosopher. He will guide you. Follow him. Okay, so it just happened to be that there was a philosopher walking by at the time. He was an Epicurean philosopher, and basically went out and he said to this guy, he's like, I love this book. I read this book, whatever. Can you teach me? What happened was he then followed this philosopher. He then joined his school, and it completely transformed his life. Okay, so he came from a position of extreme hardship, the worst thing that could ever happen. But then, because of that, he ended up in a country or a part of the country where he'd never been before. He found this guy who he then followed. Okay, and he started to learn from him. So he started to learn the way of philosophy, and eventually he started a philosophy of his own, which ended up being called Stoicism. Now, if that hadn't happened to him, he wouldn't have been shipwrecked. I wouldn't have learned a lot of what I've learned today, and you wouldn't be about to learn what you're about to learn right now. So the reason I tell you that story is because it's really important that we don't look at hardship in life and things and bad things in life as the be all and end all. Okay, like that's a terrible thing. You lost everything. Imagine you lost everything right now. But that led to a decision and a conversation that then changed the trajectory of your life. That can happen. And that's one thing that Stoicism teaches us through something called the dichotomy of control, which I'm going to speak about from here. Now, it's really the center of Stoicism. This idea that there are things in life that we can control and things that we cannot. And the things that we cannot control are much greater than the things that we can actually control. So like the weather, guess what? Can't control it. What I think of you, you can't control. What you think of me, I can't control that. We can't control people's thoughts on us. We can't control necessarily how other people act. We can influence those things, but we can't control them. And the reason that people become so upset in life, they get a victim mentality and everything like that, is because they believe that they can change these things. And like, oh, that shouldn't be that way for this reason or whatever. Whereas one of the most powerful things that the Stoics had and that Zeno had is that he realised, listen, that's out with my control. It's happened. Like, it's literally happened. What am I going to do? And as a young man, I think it's so important. We hear about it all the time. It's like, what are you going to do in that case? It's how you react to that that will dictate the type of person that you are. If you think of somebody that inspires you, it's not based on what they say. Like, they don't just say stuff. They back it up and they go and do it. And that's what anybody that inspires me does. They are somebody that, yes, may not have been dealt the best cards, but they act regardless of it. They respond to it in the way that they can control. So that is the dichotomy of control. There's so many things that we cannot control, and there's the definition of it here. Basically, it allows us to find happiness in hardship, contentment in adversity, and acceptance in loss. That's what the dichotomy of control does, because it makes us realize, listen, I really don't control this. So the point of me getting upset about it really isn't there. Now, of course, you're gonna get upset. You're gonna grieve certain things in life. However, at the end of the day, once you've experienced that, you'll learn that you can take positives from it. You can grow. You can improve through hardship and difficulty. So that's the idea of it. It's the idea that we can control how we respond to things. That's the one thing we can always control. That the Stoics believed, it was how we respond to things. So how Zeno responded to that hardship, he still wanted to learn and improve. Or would he have just been like, oh no, that's it. I'm not going to do anything now for the rest of my life. I'm going to live on the streets. I'm not going to do anything. He had that choice. And you have that choice every day. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. There might be that initial anger response, of course. But what do you do after that? How do you act? Do you let it control you for the rest of the day? And do you then treat other people worse because of how somebody cut you off in the morning? That's not their fault. That's your fault. You need to take ownership and responsibility for that. You control how you respond to it. You can't control that it happened, but you can control how you respond to that. And that's the core of Stoicism. That is the core for every young man, every person in self-improvement, is we can control how we respond to things. That's what makes you the type of person that you are. If you want people to trust you and find some form of authority and trust in your words, you need to back them up. And we can do that through realizing what we can control and what we can't control from there. So again, it's one of the most important points of Stoicism. And there's a thing called the Serenity Prayer, which is actually, I've got the kind of prayer here, and I really like it because it is essentially talking about the dichotomy of control. And it says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And that is the very important part. Because a lot of people get confused with what they can, what they can't control in life. So what that kind of serenity prayer there is saying is like, I want to understand what I can control, what I can't control. I want to be able to accept the things that I can't change. And I want the courage to be able to go forward and change the things that I have control over. Because the truth is we can control a few things in life. We can control how we respond to it. But it's the courage that people lack. They don't have the courage to take the step that they want to do. So we have all things from that. So I really do like that prayer, and it relates very well to the dichotomy of control from there. Marcus Aurelius, my favourite, he says it very well. He says, you have control over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Because initially when people think of the dichotomy of control, they think, oh, well, I don't control anything, so what's the point? I can't control what happens to me, so what's the point of me even trying? That's not the point. You're looking at it from the wrong angle here. The thing is that we can always control how we respond to things. So again, we don't focus on what we can't control. We take a lot of thought into what we can control and what we can respond to. Because then you can actually take ownership in your decision and say, right, well, I responded to that in the right way, or I responded in the wrong way, whatever it happens to be from there. And in my opinion, it helps us avoid that victim mentality of that, because we take ownership in our decisions and our actions. That's how we respond to things. It's like, so if you responded to things in the wrong way, you had control over that. Okay, so you can take ownership and say, listen, I responded in the wrong way. I'm going to do different from now on onwards. And again, that's what you can control. You can't control the thing that happened, but you control how you respond to it. So that's what I want you to take from that learning from there. Now, with Stoicism, one of the reasons I like it so much is because they put such a heavy emphasis on learning, on continuous learning. They didn't put people above people on a pedestal because, you know, they had some form of authority or status. It was like people were always learning. Even Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, the most powerful man on the planet, he had everything there was to have. He had the most power you could ever have. And there's a story of him, somebody called Lucius, and basically he'd come through Rome, and he'd came past Marcus Aurelius, and he said to him, basically he'd passed by, and he said, Marcus, where are you going? What are you doing? And he was like, oh, I'm running errands. He was going to do things. He said, what are you going to do? And he says, I'm going to learn that which I do not yet know. And that is the most powerful man on the planet saying that he's going to learn. Literally, and this time he would have been in his 40s, he would have been in his 50s. He wasn't a young man, he was an older man. He had all the power and control you could ever have, but he still wanted to learn. And that is at the core of Stoicism. Seneca talks about it as well, about reading and improving yourself. Socrates, not a Stoic, but he spoke about it as well. He spoke about always improving, employ your time in reading other men's writings so that you gain easily what others laboured hard for. So again, you're learning, you're improving. That is a key concept of Stoicism and of self-improvement. So that is one of the reasons why I think it's so important for young guys, is to focus on improvement, to focus on always learning. Never get to the stage where you're content with, oh, I know enough or whatever. You can always learn, you can always improve, you can always get better. And one thing you can always get better at is how you respond to things. We'll never quite be amazing at that from there. Now, another bit that I really love about Stoicism is a Latin phrase that they used a lot, and it is memento mori. Now, what this Latin phrase meant was, remember you are mortal, or remember you must die. It's basically this very similar thing. And the Stoics spoke about it. It wasn't just the Stoics that coined the term, but they spoke about it a lot in terms of remembering, listen, life is short. You need to maximize it and everything like that. Or as Seneca once said, he said, it's not that we have a short time to live, it's that we waste so much of it. So it's like, you can take that from that. You can think, listen, I don't have all the time in the world here. I'm wasting it. So let's make the most of it and let's push forward from here. So that's one thing that you can do. But I like to use it as a constant reminder, a Stoic reminder to push forward. So again, remember you must die. You will die. It could be any time. Use that not as a negative. Again, it's out with your control. It's out with the dichotomy of control. But what you can control is how you respond to it. So how do you respond to things in life? That you try to do the most, you try to grow, you try to improve and do better from here. A really interesting use case of this was a slave called an ariga. And they were like a slave. Basically, if a general or an emperor won a war or a battle, they'd be going through Rome, people cheering, throwing things like that. And the job of this ariga, they had one job. They sat beside them, behind the emperor or the general, and they whisper in their ear, they say, memento mori, memento mori. Imagine that. You're the most powerful person ever. You're celebrating a win, and they're saying, remember you must die. Like, they're telling you that. So you're not overcome by that, and so you're brought back into the situation at hand, and you think, right, okay, I've still got work to do here from here. And I think it's a really powerful thing. Again, it teaches us, Stoicism teaches us necessarily not to fear death. Now, we always will fear death. None of us will become completely content with it, but we can all strive towards it and realise that inevitably it is out with our control, which will help us deal with that from there. So it's one of my favourite learnings from Stoicism that I feel that you can take from it, and it will create urgency in your life. Now, the next thing is probably, apart from the dichotomy of control, my favourite thing about Stoicism. It's one of their 4 virtues. So they had wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. And one of them, which I just mentioned, is temperance. Now, temperance is voluntary self-restraint. So when we think of that, people coin it to discipline, because it is. It's very similar. Temperance helps us become disciplined. So again, voluntary self-restraint. So that is you, on a voluntary reason, stopping yourself from doing something. So that could be a bad habit. It could be things that you need to not do right now to become the type of person or to get in the situation where you want to be. It could be not eating that cake now and wait until you're healthier dinner an hour later. These are such small decisions, but the more you practice this temperance, the more disciplined you become. And it's always accessible to you. It's like people say, oh, well, I can't practice discipline. I can't get up early because I have work, or I can't go to the gym because I have this and that. Okay, that's fine. But you can always practice temperance within your day. Voluntary self-restraint. You can restrain from saying something. Maybe you have you have gossip or something you want to share, but you know it's not going to do you any good sharing it. Well, then you can hold that back. That's voluntary self-restraint. So it could be with things that you're going to say, it could be with actions, all these things. You can voluntary self-restraint. You can stop yourself from doing that. And that's what the Stoics found so important in this, because I've got here, it's like, by practicing to live without things, we aren't controlled by them. And that's what they're doing with temperance. It's like, Seneca often went a long period of time without certain foods, like these luxurious foods. Marcus Aurelius used to sleep on the floor. Silly wee things, right? But you're practicing temperance, voluntary self-restraint from the comforts and luxuries that we have in life. So you're not controlled by them, and you're understanding that in yourself from there. So again, it's something that I use every single day, temperance. It can be with tiny wee decisions that sound stupid, but it really helps us in the long term become more temperate, become more disciplined from there. So temperance is something you can take with you and practice from there to help you become more disciplined, because in today's world, as a young guy, we are distracted by so many things. Discipline is key to get where we want to be, to becoming the type of person we want to be. We need to be disciplined, and temperance and practicing that voluntary self-restraint can help you do that. Now, a few takeaways from today's episode that I have for you are, first of all, realize that this is something we never really spoke about much, but it comes from the dichotomy of control, is that realize that happiness isn't in external things, it's within your own mind and your own thoughts and how you perceive the world. Because as the dichotomy of control says, things we do not control can be taken away from us at any time. That is not where happiness is. That can be removed from you. If your only source of happiness comes from things that can be taken away from you and removed, then you're not going to be happy for very long. Whereas, as Marcus Aurelius says, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. So if you have quality thoughts that result in quality actions, that will change your perception. It will change the results you get in life from there. Now, dichotomy of control, realize what you can actually control. What you can control is your response to things, your reasoned choices, they say, like how you respond to things. Again, initially there may be anger in like a spark decision or something like that, but after that, how do you respond to it? Do you respond with courage? Do you respond with temperance, with wisdom? Do you respond with any of these things, or do you respond like an immature wee guy that can't control his emotions? Which isn't how most of us want to be. We want to be in control of that. And that is what temperance is, which again is our last one. Practice temperance, restrain from doing things that you have control over, and that is going to help you become more disciplined and push forward. So again, I think that Stoicism can really be at the key of the core of your self-improvement. I encourage you to read into it. The Meditations by Marcus Aurelius are a great book. Seneca and the Shortness of Life is another I've read that I'm a big fan of. All of these things just help change your perception of the world, what we can control, what we can't control. And again, will help you on your journey with self-improvement from here. I have one quote to leave you with, and it is a short one from here. And it says, we must stop believing that happiness consists in things and realize instead that it consists alone in virtuous living. Because with the Stoics, they believed in virtue. Okay, they believed in living in alignment with these virtues, which are the four things I mentioned. Okay, so like your temperance, your courage, your wisdom, things like that. It's like when you live in alignment with these things, you become a virtuous person. That is where we get happiness from, not external things, not from, oh, when I get this, I'll be happy. Or when somebody says this or does that, you're out with your control. But you can control how you respond to things. You can control with wisdom. You can respond, with wisdom, by making good decisions. You can respond with temperance by restraining yourself from doing things. You can do all of these things. And I feel like that's what Stoicism gives us the power to understand. So I think that's what you can take away from it from there. But again, as ever, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you take something from it, and I hope you apply it to your own pursuit of constant improvement. Thank you for listening.